Maya Chen had only $5 in her pocket when she saw the bleeding dog limping across the 6-lane intersection. But what happened next would shake the very foundations of one of the city's most powerful men. As luxury cars honked their horns and drivers shouted from their windows, this 12-year-old girl made a decision that would echo through boardrooms and charity galas for years to come. She didn't know that the man stepping out of the black Bentley was worth $3 billion. She didn't know he was on his way to the most important evening of his social calendar. And she certainly didn't know that her simple answer to his question would haunt him in the best possible way. But as she knelt in the middle of traffic, cradling a wounded animal while the city's elite sat trapped in their metal cocoons, one truth became crystal clear. Sometimes the smallest acts of courage create the biggest waves of change. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button for more real, emotional, life-changing stories like this. And let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The afternoon sun blazed mercilessly over the concrete arteries of downtown Chicago, turning the asphalt into a shimmering mirage that made the air dance with heat waves. Maya Chen walked along the cracked sidewalk of Michigan Avenue, her worn sneakers making soft scuffing sounds against the pavement as she clutched the crumpled $5 bill her grandmother had given her that morning. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her thin shoulders like an invisible backpack filled with stones. At 12 years old, she had learned to navigate the city's rhythms with the careful precision of someone much older, someone who understood that every dollar mattered, every decision carried consequences, and every day brought new challenges that required both courage and wisdom beyond her years. The traffic moved in its usual chaotic symphony, a blend of honking horns, revving engines, and the occasional screech of brakes that had become the city's soundtrack. Maya paused at the corner of Michigan and Randolph, waiting for the pedestrian signal to change, when she noticed something that made her heart skip a beat. A small brown dog, its fur matted and dirty, was limping desperately across the busy intersection. Blood dripped from a gash on its left hind leg, leaving a trail of crimson dots on the hot asphalt, like breadcrumbs in a twisted fairy tale. The dog moved with the painful determination of a creature that had learned survival meant never stopping, never giving up, even when every step brought agony. Cars swerved around it, their drivers more concerned with maintaining their speed than acknowledging the suffering creature sharing their space. Maya watched in horror as a delivery truck missed the dog by mere inches, its horn blaring in annoyance rather than warning. The sound made the injured animal stumble, nearly falling before catching itself and continuing its treacherous journey across the remaining lanes. Without conscious thought, Maya's feet carried her into the street. The pedestrian signal still glowed red, but her mind had already calculated the risk and decided that some things mattered more than traffic laws. She held up her hands, her small frame barely visible against the backdrop of towering vehicles, and began walking toward the wounded dog. The first car to approach her slammed on its brakes, the driver's face contorting with rage as he laid on his horn. The sound was deafening, but Maya didn't flinch. She had made her choice, and no amount of noise or fury would change her mind. "Hey kid, get out of the road!" shouted a taxi driver, his yellow cab idling impatiently as traffic began to back up behind him. Other drivers joined the chorus of complaints, their voices blending into a cacophony of urban frustration. But Maya heard something else beneath their anger, something that made her even more determined to reach the injured animal. She heard fear. Not fear for her safety, but fear of being late, fear of missing appointments, fear of having their carefully scheduled lives disrupted by something as inconsequential as a wounded stray dog. The dog had collapsed near the center line, its breathing labored and shallow. Maya dropped to her knees beside it, her school uniform, a simple blue dress that her grandmother had carefully mended just last week, immediately staining with blood and grime. She reached out slowly, speaking in soft, soothing tones that she hoped would calm the frightened animal. "It's okay, baby. I'm here now. Nobody's going to hurt you anymore." The dog's eyes, clouded with pain and exhaustion, focused on her face with an intensity that made Maya's chest tighten with emotion. She had seen that look before, in the mirror of her own bathroom during the hardest nights, when her grandmother's medical bills seemed insurmountable and the future felt like an endless series of impossible choices. It was the look of someone who had stopped expecting help, who had learned to face the world's cruelty alone because experience had taught them that kindness was a luxury most people couldn't afford. Traffic had come to a complete standstill now, with cars backing up in all directions from the intersection. The chorus of horns grew louder and more insistent, but Maya remained focused on the injured dog, gently examining its wounds while whispering reassurances. The gash on its leg was deep, but not life-threatening if treated quickly. More concerning was the animal's obvious dehydration, and the way its ribs showed through its thin coat, evidence of weeks or perhaps months of living on the streets without adequate food or care. Among the dozens of vehicles trapped by Maya's act of defiance, a black Bentley Continental sat silent and still. Unlike the other drivers, who were either honking their horns or shouting out their windows, the man behind the wheel of this luxury sedan simply watched. Alexander Russo had been heading to the grand ballroom of the Palmer House Hotel, where Chicago's elite would gather for the annual Millennium Foundation Charity Gala. As the founder and CEO of Russo Industries, a technology empire worth billions, he was expected to give a speech about corporate responsibility and the importance of giving back to the community. The irony wasn't lost on him as he observed the young girl kneeling in the middle of traffic, risking her own safety for a creature that most people would consider worthless. Here he was, on his way to an event where wealthy individuals would write checks and pose for photographs, all while patting themselves on the back for their generosity. Yet this child, who probably had nothing, was demonstrating a level of compassion that put all their calculated philanthropy to shame. Alexander had built his fortune by understanding people, by recognizing patterns and motivations that others missed. He could see immediately that this wasn't a publicity stunt or a cry for attention. The girl's posture, the way she spoke to the dog, the complete disregard for her own appearance and safety, all spoke to something genuine and pure that he rarely encountered in his world of boardrooms and benefit dinners. He turned off his engine and stepped out of the car, his handmade Italian shoes clicking against the asphalt as he approached the scene. At 42, Alexander Russo commanded attention wherever he went. His presence filled rooms. His voice carried weight in conversations that shaped markets and influenced policies. But as he walked toward the girl and the injured dog, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years: uncertainty about what to say or do next. The other drivers noticed his approach, and the honking began to quiet as people recognized the expensive suit and the confident stride of someone clearly accustomed to authority. A few rolled down their windows, perhaps hoping that this well-dressed stranger would convince the stubborn child to move out of the way so traffic could resume its normal flow. Maya looked up as a shadow fell across her and the dog. She found herself staring at a tall man with sultan pepper hair and kind eyes that seemed to take in everything about the situation without judgment. His suit probably cost more than her grandmother made in 3 months, but he didn't seem bothered by the chaos surrounding them or concerned about the expensive watch on his wrist as precious minutes ticked away. "Is he badly hurt?" Alexander asked, his voice gentle as he knelt beside Maya on the hot asphalt. The question surprised her. She had expected anger, demands that she get out of the way, threats to call the police. Instead, this stranger was asking about the dog's condition, as if it mattered to him. "I think his leg needs stitches," Maya replied, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was doing. "And he's really thin. Probably hasn't eaten in days." She paused, studying the man's face for any sign of impatience or annoyance. "Are you mad that I'm blocking traffic?" Alexander considered the question seriously, as if it were a complex business proposal requiring careful analysis. "Well," he said finally, "I was on my way to a very important dinner. The kind where people talk about helping others while eating $60 steaks." He looked out at the dog, whose breathing had become more regular since Maya's arrival. "But I'm thinking this might be more important." The honking had resumed with renewed vigor, and several drivers had gotten out of their cars to see what was causing the delay. A police siren could be heard in the distance, growing closer with each passing second. Maya felt a flutter of panic in her chest. She had enough experience with authority figures to know that her age and appearance wouldn't earn her much sympathy from law enforcement. "They're going to make me move," she said, her voice small but determined. "And then what happens to him?" He can't make it across the street like this. He'll just get hit by another car, and next time nobody will stop. Alexander saw the fear in her eyes, but also something else that reminded him of his younger self, back when he was building his first company, and everyone told him he was too young, too inexperienced, too naive to succeed. It was the look of someone who knew the odds were stacked against them but refused to back down anyway. "What's your name?" he asked. "Maya Chen." "Well, Maya Chen, how would you feel about letting me help you get this little guy somewhere safe?" Maya studied his face carefully, weighing her options with the cautious wisdom of someone who had learned not to trust easily. "You'd really help? Even though it means you'll be late for your important dinner?" "I have a feeling this is going to be more memorable than anything that would have happened at that dinner," Alexander replied, and as the words left his mouth, he realized how true they were. When was the last time he had done something purely because it was right, without calculating the potential return on investment or considering how it might benefit his company's image? The police car had arrived, its red and blue lights painting the intersection in alternating colors of authority. Officer Janet Rodriguez stepped out of her vehicle with the practiced efficiency of someone who had seen every possible variation of urban drama. She expected to find the usual cast of characters. An angry crowd, a defiant teenager, maybe some property damage or a brewing fight. Instead, she discovered a well-dressed businessman and a young girl kneeling beside an injured dog in the middle of one of the city's busiest intersections. All right, what's the situation here?" Officer Rodriguez asked, her tone professional but not unkind. She had been walking this beat for 8 years and had developed a sixth sense for distinguishing between genuine problems and manufactured drama. Alexander stood up, brushing dust from his knees as he extended his hand to the officer. "Alexander Russo, officer. This young lady stopped traffic to help this injured animal. We were just discussing the best way to get him to a veterinarian." The use of "we" wasn't lost on Maya, who felt a surge of gratitude toward this stranger who had chosen to stand beside her rather than against her. Officer Rodriguez recognized the name immediately. Everyone in Chicago knew Alexander Russo, either from business news or from the charitable foundations that bore his name throughout the city. "Mr. Russo, I appreciate what you're trying to do here, but we need to get traffic moving again. This intersection handles over 50,000 vehicles a day, and we've got backups stretching for blocks in every direction." Maya felt her heart sink. She had known this moment would come, when adult practicality would override her desperate attempt to save one small life. But then Alexander did something that surprised everyone, including himself. "Officer Rodriguez, what if I told you I could solve the traffic problem and make sure this dog gets the medical attention he needs?" "I'd ask you how you plan to do that, sir." Alexander pulled out his phone and dialed a number from memory. "Marcus? It's Alexander. I need you to bring the helicopter to Michigan and Randolph, right now." "Yes, I know you're not supposed to land downtown." "Yes, I know it's not an emergency. And yes, I'll handle the FAA complaints personally." He ended the call and looked at both Maya and Officer Rodriguez. "My pilot will be here in 10 minutes. We'll transport the dog to the Chicago Veterinary Emergency Clinic, and traffic can resume normal flow." Officer Rodriguez stared at him for a moment, processing the casual way he had just summoned a private helicopter to solve a traffic problem caused by a stray dog. "Mr. Russo, are you serious right now?" "Completely serious. Though I should mention that Maya here will be coming with us. I have a feeling she's not going to let this dog out of her sight until she knows he's going to be okay." Maya looked up at Alexander with wonder and gratitude that made his chest tighten with an emotion he couldn't quite name. "You'd really do all that? For a dog you don't even know?" "Maya, 5 minutes ago I was worried about being late for a dinner where I was going to give a speech about the importance of compassion and community service. You've just shown me what those words actually mean." He paused, watching as she gently stroked the dog's head. "Besides, I think you and I both know this isn't really about the dog, is it?" The wisdom in his words struck Maya like a physical blow. He was right. Of course. This was about every time she had walked past someone in need because she didn't have the resources to help. This was about every night she lay awake worrying about her grandmother's tasks. mounting medical bills while billionaires debated tax policies that would never affect their daily lives. This was about a world that seemed designed to make people choose between kindness and survival, when the truth was that sometimes they were the same thing. The sound of rotor blades filled the air as Marcus Johansson, Alexander's pilot for the past 6 years, brought the helicopter down in a carefully controlled landing on the intersection. The downdraft scattered debris and sent papers flying, but the crowd that had gathered to watch the spectacle cheered and applauded, as if they were witnessing a movie being filmed. Officer Rodriguez shook her head in amazement as Alexander gently lifted the injured dog, while Maya gathered her backpack and prepared to climb into a helicopter for the first time in her life. "Mr. Russo, I've been a cop for 8 years, and I've never seen anything like this." "Officer Rodriguez, I've been alive for 42 years, and neither have I." The flight to the veterinary clinic took only 12 minutes, but for Maya, it felt like entering another world entirely. She had lived her entire life within a 20-block radius of her grandmother's apartment, taking the bus to school and walking everywhere else. The aerial view of Chicago spread out below them like a glittering circuit board, each light representing lives and stories and dreams that seemed both infinite and intimately connected. Alexander watched Maya's face as she pressed her nose against the helicopter's window, her eyes wide with wonder, despite the injured dog cradled carefully in her lap. He found himself seeing his city through her perspective, noticing things that his usual ground-level view of luxury cars and private elevators had caused him to miss. The rooftop gardens that provided green spaces and concrete jungles, the playground murals painted by community volunteers, the small signs of hope and beauty that persisted even in the most challenging neighborhoods. "Have you ever been in a helicopter before?" Alexander asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Maya shook her head, her attention split between the aerial view and the dog's steady breathing. "My grandmother always said that some experiences were for other people, people who lived different kinds of lives than us." She paused, considering her words carefully. "But I think maybe she was wrong about that." "What do you think she was wrong about?" "I think she was wrong that there are different kinds of lives. I think there are just different kinds of opportunities, and sometimes you have to make your own opportunities when the world doesn't give them to you." Alexander felt something shift inside his chest, a realignment of priorities that he hadn't expected and couldn't fully explain. This 12-year-old girl, who had probably never set foot inside a boardroom or attended a charity gala, had just articulated a truth that had eluded him for decades of business success and philanthropic endeavors. The Chicago Veterinary Emergency Clinic occupied a converted warehouse in the River North District. Its modern facilities and state-of-the-art equipment, funded partly by donations from wealthy benefactors who wanted to ensure that the city's animal population received proper medical care regardless of their Dawson owners' financial situations. As the helicopter touched down in the clinic's parking lot, Dr. Sarah Kim emerged from the building, having been alerted by Alexander's assistant about the incoming emergency. Dr. Kim had been practicing veterinary medicine for 15 years, and she had learned to read both animals and their human companions with equal skill. She could tell immediately that the injured dog had been living on the streets for an extended period, but she could also see that despite his malnourishment and wounds, he possessed the kind of gentle temperament that made prey for excellent family pets. "Let's get him inside and see what we're dealing with," Dr. Kim said, leading Maya and Alexander into an examination room that looked more like something from a human hospital than a traditional veterinary clinic. The walls were painted in soothing blues and greens, and classical music played softly from hidden speakers. As Dr. Kim began her examination, Maya stood close enough to the table to keep her hand on the dog's head, whispering reassurances while the veterinarian worked. Alexander found himself studying Maya's face, noting the way her expression shifted between concern and determination, fear and hope. He realized that he was witnessing something rare and precious, the kind of unfiltered emotional honesty that his world of calculated interactions and strategic relationships had trained him to suppress. "Well, the good news is that nothing has broke him," Dr. Kim announced after completing her initial assessment. "The leg wound will need cleaning and stitches, and he's definitely undernourished, but with proper care, he should make a full recovery. She paused, looking between Maya and Alexander. The question is, what happens to him after he's healed? Maya's face fell as the reality of the situation struck her. She had acted on instinct to save the dog's life, but she hadn't thought through the practical implications of her rescue. Her grandmother's tiny apartment didn't allow pets, and their tight budget couldn't accommodate the ongoing expenses of caring for an animal. "I want to keep him," Maya said quietly, "but I don't think I can. We don't have enough money for food and vet bills, and our landlord doesn't allow pets." Her voice cracked slightly as she continued. "I just couldn't let him die in the street, you know? Even if I can't keep him, at least now he has a chance." Alexander felt his heart break a little at the resignation in her voice, the way she had already accepted that wanting something and being able to have it were often two very different things. It was a lesson that wealth had allowed him to forget, but one that Maya had learned far too early. "Maya," he said carefully, "what if I told you that wouldn't have to be a problem?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if we could make sure he gets the best possible care? And what if we could also make sure that other dogs like him could help too?" Maya looked at him with confusion and hope warring in her expression. "I don't understand." Alexander pulled out his phone and began typing rapidly, his thumbs moving across the screen with the efficiency of someone accustomed to making million-dollar decisions via text message. "I'm canceling my appearance at tonight's gala," he explained as he typed. "Instead, I'm going to have my foundation's lawyers draw up papers for a new project, the Maya Chen Animal Rescue Center." The words hung in the air like something magical, too wonderful to believe, but too specific to be a joke. Maya stared at Alexander, as if he had just announced his intention to build a rocket ship in the clinic's parking lot. "You can't be serious," she whispered. "I'm completely serious. Maya, do you know what I was going to talk about at that gala tonight? I was going to give a 20-minute speech about the importance of community service and corporate responsibility. I was going to tell a room full of wealthy people that we have an obligation to help those who can't help themselves." He paused, watching her face carefully. "But you've just shown me that help doesn't have to come from people with money and power. Sometimes it comes from people with courage and compassion. And sometimes those people are 12 years old and have nothing but $5 and a heart big enough to stop traffic." Dr. Kim had been quietly observing this exchange while continuing to treat the injured dog, and she found herself moved by the genuine emotion in both voices. She had seen many wealthy clients over the years, people who donated large sums to animal charities as tax write-offs or social obligations. But she had never witnessed anything like this raw, unscripted moment of connection between two people from completely different worlds. "Mr. Russo," Dr. Kim interjected gently, "if you're serious about this, I should mention that this little guy isn't the only one who needs help. We see dozens of stray and abandoned animals every month, and our resources are always stretched thin." "That's exactly why we need a dedicated facility," Alexander replied, his business mind already working through the logistics. "Maya, how would you feel about being the center's first junior ambassador? You could help with adoptions, education programs, fundraising events. We can even set up a scholarship program for veterinary students who want to specialize in rescue and rehabilitation work." Maya felt overwhelmed by the scope of what Alexander was proposing, but also energized by the possibility of turning her spontaneous act of compassion into something larger and more lasting. "You'd really want me to help run it?" "Maya, I've spent my entire career learning to recognize potential. And you have something that can't be taught in business school or acquired through experience. You have the ability to see suffering and respond to it without calculating the cost or considering the consequences. That's not just rare, Iber. It's precious." The dog on the examination table had fallen asleep during Dr. Kim's ministrations, his breathing deep and regular for the first time since Maya had found him in the intersection. The sight of his peaceful rest filled her with a satisfaction that was deeper and more complete than any grade she had ever received or compliment she had ever been given. "What would we call him?" Maya asked, gently stroking the sleeping dog's ear. "What do you think we should call him?" Maya considered the question seriously, thinking about the journey that had brought them all together in this unlikely moment. "What about courage?" because that's what it took for all of us to be here right now." Alexander smiled, and for the first time in years, it was a smile that had nothing to do with business negotiations or social obligations. "Courage it is." As Dr. Kim finished bandaging Courage's leg, she explained the recovery process and the follow-up care that would be needed. Alexander listened intently, already mentally calculating the resources that would be required not just for Courage, but for the dozens of other animals that would benefit from the rescue center Maya had unknowingly inspired. "Dr. Kim," Alexander said, "would you be interested in serving as the medical director for our new facility?" Dr. Kim's eyes widened with surprise and excitement. "Mr. Russo, are you offering me a job?" "I'm offering you the opportunity to build something from the ground up. Something that could serve as a model for animal rescue operations throughout the country. Maya has shown us what's possible when someone cares enough to act. Now we need to create a system that can turn that individual courage into lasting change." The three of them spent the next hour discussing plans and possibilities, their conversation flowing with the natural rhythm of people who had discovered a shared passion. Maya contributed ideas with the practical wisdom of someone who understood the daily realities of urban life, while Alexander brought the strategic thinking and resources necessary to turn dreams into operational reality. Dr. Kim provided the medical expertise and professional connections that would ensure their rescue center met the highest standards of animal care. As the evening shadows began to lengthen outside the clinic windows, Maya realized that her grandmother would be wondering where she was. She had never been away from home this long without calling, and she knew that Mrs. Chen would be worried sick. "I should probably get home," Maya said reluctantly. "My grandmother will be scared if I don't show up for dinner." "Of course," Alexander replied. "But Maya, before you go, I want you to know that this isn't just some impulsive gesture that I'll forget about tomorrow. What happened today changed something in me, something I didn't even realize needed changing." "What do you mean?" Alexander struggled to find words for the transformation he felt occurring within himself. The way Maya's simple act had illuminated the disconnect between his public persona and his private values. "I've been successful in business because I learned to identify opportunities and act on them quickly. But somewhere along the way, I think I forgot that the most important opportunities aren't always the ones that make money or increase market share. Sometimes they're the ones that make you remember why success matters in the first place." Maya nodded with understanding that seemed far beyond her years. "My grandmother always says that money is just a tool, like a hammer or a screwdriver. It's not good or bad by itself, but it becomes good or bad depending on what you build with it." "Your grandmother sounds like a very wise woman. I'd like to meet her sometime, if that would be okay with you." "She'd like that. She always says that you can tell a lot about a person by what they do when they think nobody important is watching." Alexander felt the truth of those words settle over him like a gentle weight. Maya Chen had been watching when he stepped out of his car and knelt beside her in the intersection. But at that moment, she hadn't known he was anyone important by conventional measures. His decision to help had been made without consideration for his public image or business interests. And perhaps that was why it felt more meaningful than any charitable contribution he had ever made. The helicopter ride back to Maya's neighborhood gave them both time to process the events of the day and consider what came next. As they flew over the same intersection where their paths had crossed just hours earlier, Maya could see the traffic had returned to its normal flow, as if their dramatic rescue had been nothing more than a temporary disruption in the city's relentless rhythm. But Maya knew better. She understood that some disruptions create ripples that extend far beyond their initial impact, changing the course of lives in ways that aren't immediately visible but become apparent over time. She thought about the butterfly effect her science teacher had explained last month. How small changes in one part of a system could lead to large changes elsewhere. "Mr. Russo," Maya said as the helicopter began its descent toward the small park near her apartment building, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you really help me today? I mean, you could have just stayed in your car like everyone else." Alexander considered the question carefully, wanting to give her an honest answer rather than something that sounded good but wasn't entirely true. "Maya, I think I helped you because you reminded me of something I had forgotten. You reminded me that the person I wanted to be when I was your age isn't so different from the person I could still choose to be now." What kind of person did you want to be? Someone who made a difference. Someone who used whatever advantages they had to help people who didn't have those same advantages. He paused, looking down at the streets below where people were walking home from work, carrying groceries, pushing strollers, living their lives with the same mixture of hope and struggle that characterized the human experience everywhere. I achieved more success than I ever imagined possible, but somewhere along the way, I started measuring that success by the wrong standards. Maya understood what he meant. Even though her own experience with success was limited to good grades and her grandmother's proud smiles, she had seen how easy it was to lose sight of what really mattered when external pressures demanded your attention and energy. The helicopter touched down gently in the park, and Maya gathered her backpack while Alexander helped her out of the aircraft. The sight of a private helicopter landing in their modest neighborhood had drawn a small crowd of curious onlookers, including several children who attended Maya's school. "Maya Chen, is that really you?" called out Jessica Martinez, a classmate who lived 2 blocks away. "Why are you getting out of a helicopter?" Maya felt a moment of self-consciousness as she realized that her adventure would soon become neighborhood gossip. But then she remembered the injured dog they had saved and the rescue center that would bear her name. Some stories were worth the attention they attracted. "It's a long story," Maya replied with a smile. "I'll tell you about it tomorrow." As Alexander prepared to leave, he handed Maya a business card with his personal phone number written on the back. "Maya, I want you to call me tomorrow after school. We have a lot of planning to do, and I'm going to need your help with every step of this project." "You really mean it? About the rescue center and everything?" "I mean every word. Maya, what you did today wasn't just brave, it was inspiring. And inspiration is the most valuable commodity in the world, because it's the only thing that can transform good intentions into real change." Maya watched as the helicopter lifted off and disappeared into the evening sky, carrying Alexander back to his world of boardrooms and charity galas. But she knew that their paths would cross again soon, and when they did, they would be working together to create something that neither of them could have built alone. Mrs. Chen was waiting on the apartment building's front steps when Maya walked up the sidewalk, her weathered face creased with worry and relief. At 73, Eleanor Chen had raised her granddaughter with the practical wisdom of someone who had survived war, immigration, and decades of economic uncertainty. She could read Maya's moods and motivations with the accuracy of a seismograph detecting emotional earthquakes. "Maya Elizabeth Chen, where have you been?" Mrs. Chen asked, using Maya's full name in the tone that indicated serious discussion was required. "You were supposed to be home 2 hours ago, and Mrs. Rodriguez from 4B said she saw you getting into a helicopter in the park." Maya sat down beside her grandmother on the concrete steps, suddenly feeling the full weight of the day's events. "Grandma, something incredible happened today, and I don't think you're going to believe it." Over the next hour, Maya recounted every detail of her adventure, from the moment she saw Courage limping across the intersection to her final conversation with Alexander in the helicopter. Mrs. Chen listened, without interruption, her expression shifting from concern to amazement to something that looked like pride mixed with apprehension. "Maya," Mrs. Chen said when the story was complete, "what you did was very brave, but also very dangerous. You could have been hurt or killed stepping into traffic like that." "I know, Grandma. But I couldn't just watch him suffer when I knew I could help." Mrs. Chen studied her granddaughter's face, seeing echoes of her own younger self in Maya's determined expression. Eleanor Chen had made her own share of risky decisions over the years, choices that had brought her family to America and created opportunities for future generations. She understood the difference between reckless behavior and calculated courage. "Tell me about this, Mr. Russo," Mrs. Chen said. "What kind of man stops his important business to help a child save an injured dog?" Maya considered the question carefully, thinking about the way Alexander had knelt beside her in the intersection without regard for his expensive suit. The genuine emotion in his voice when he talked about building the rescue center, the respect he had shown her ideas and opinions throughout their planning discussion. "I think he's the kind of man who forgot who he wanted to be, and I reminded him," Maya said finally. "Grandma, he didn't help me because he thought it would be good publicity or because someone was watching. He helped me because it was the right thing to do. Mrs. Chen nodded slowly, recognizing wisdom in her granddaughter's assessment. She had lived long enough to develop reliable instincts about people's character and motivations, and Maya's description rang true to her. Experienced ears. Maya, if this man is serious about building a rescue center and making you part of it, that's a wonderful opportunity. But you need to understand that with opportunities come responsibilities. Are you prepared for that? What kind of responsibilities? The responsibility to represent not just yourself, but everyone who believes in what you're trying to accomplish. The responsibility to work hard even when the excitement wears off and the daily tasks become routine. The responsibility to make decisions that benefit the animals in the community, even when those decisions might not be what you personally want. Maya absorbed her grandmother's words, understanding that Mrs. Chen was offering her the kind of guidance that came from decades of experience with both success and disappointment. Grandma, do you think I'm too young to handle those kinds of responsibilities? Maya, age isn't measured in years, it's measured in the quality of your choices when faced with difficult decisions. Today you chose to risk your own safety to help a creature that couldn't help itself. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. That night, Maya lay in bed staring at the ceiling of the small bedroom she had occupied for as long as she could remember. The business card Alexander had given her sat on her nightstand, its crisp white surface bearing the weight of possibilities she was still trying to fully comprehend. She thought about Courage, recovering in his kennel at the veterinary clinic, and wondered if he understood that his rescue had set in motion events that would change not just his life, but the lives of countless other animals in need. She also thought about Alexander Russo, probably in his expensive penthouse apartment, perhaps staring at his own ceiling and contemplating the unexpected turn his life had taken. Maya sensed that their meeting had affected him as profoundly as it had affected her, though in different ways. She had gained access to resources and opportunities that would allow her to help animals on a scale she had never imagined possible. He had rediscovered a sense of purpose that money couldn't buy, and power couldn't create. The next morning arrived with the gentle persistence of autumn sunshine filtering through Maya's bedroom window. She woke with the immediate memory of the previous day's events, half expecting to discover that the entire adventure had been an elaborate dream. But Alexander's business card remained on her nightstand, solid proof that her life had indeed changed in the most unexpected way. Maya dressed carefully for school, choosing her cleanest uniform and brushing her hair with extra attention to detail. She sensed that today would bring new challenges and opportunities, and she wanted to face them with confidence and professionalism. Her grandmother had packed an extra special lunch, including the homemade dumplings she usually reserved for holidays and celebrations. "Remember what we talked about last night?" Mrs. Chen said as Maya prepared to leave for school. "Opportunities bring responsibilities, but they also bring the chance to make a real difference in the world." Maya nodded, kissing her grandmother's cheek before heading out into the crisp morning air. The walk to school felt different today, as if the familiar streets had been subtly transformed by yesterday's events. She noticed things she had overlooked before, small details that seemed to carry new significance in light of her expanded understanding of how individual actions could create ripple effects throughout a community. At Roosevelt Elementary, Maya's arrival created a buzz of excitement and curiosity. Word had spread quickly through the tight-knit neighborhood about her helicopter adventure, and classmates surrounded her with questions before she even reached her locker. Maya found herself in the unusual position of being the center of attention, something that both thrilled and intimidated her. "Maya, is it true you really stopped traffic to save a dog?" asked Tommy Rodriguez, a sixth grader known for his skepticism about anything that sounded too good to be true. "It's true," Maya replied simply, not wanting to embellish the story, but also not wanting to downplay the significance of what had happened. "And this rich guy really came out of his car to help you?" pressed Sarah Kim, Tommy's best friend and partner in academic competition. "He did. His name is Alexander Russo, and he's going to build an animal rescue center." Maya paused, still marveling at the words as she spoke them. "He asked me to be the junior ambassador." The crowd of students erupted in excited chatter, everyone talking at once about the implications of having a celebrity in their midst. Maya felt overwhelmed by the attention, but also recognized an opportunity to turn their enthusiasm into something constructive. "Actually," Maya said, raising her voice to be heard over the commotion, "if you guys really want to help, maybe we could start a fundraising committee right here at school. I bet there are lots of animals in our neighborhood who need help, and we could make a difference even before the rescue center is built." The suggestion sparked immediate interest from several students, including Maria Santos, the class president known for her organizational skills and infectious enthusiasm for community service projects. Within minutes, they had formed an impromptu planning committee and scheduled a meeting for lunch to discuss specific fundraising ideas. Maya's teacher, Mrs. Patterson, had been observing the hallway discussion with interest and approached as the crowd began to disperse toward their respective classrooms. "Maya, I heard about your adventure yesterday. That was incredibly brave of you." "Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. I hope I didn't cause too much trouble by missing part of the school day." "Maya, sometimes the most important learning happens outside the classroom. What you did yesterday taught you things about courage, compassion, and leadership that no textbook could ever convey." Mrs. Patterson paused, studying Maya's face with the perceptive eyes of an educator who genuinely cared about her students' development. "I'd like to talk to you after class about incorporating your rescue center project into our social studies curriculum. I think your classmates could learn a lot from being involved in something real and meaningful." The morning passed in a blur of regular classes, punctuated by whispered conversations about the previous day's events. Maya found it difficult to concentrate on math problems and history lessons when her mind kept drifting to thoughts of Courage's recovery and the rescue center that would soon bear her name. During lunch, the newly formed fundraising committee met in Mrs. Patterson's classroom to brainstorm ideas for supporting local animal welfare efforts. "We could organize a pet supply drive," suggested Maria Santos, already taking notes on a legal pad she had borrowed from the teacher's desk. "Lots of families have extra dog food or old blankets they'd be willing to donate." "What about a car wash?" offered Tommy Rodriguez, his earlier skepticism replaced by genuine enthusiasm for the project. "My uncle runs an auto repair shop, and he might let us use his parking lot on weekends." Maya listened to her classmates' ideas with growing excitement, realizing that Alexander had been right about the inspirational power of individual action. Her decision to help Courage had not only saved one animal's life, but it also awakened a spirit of community service among her peers that might never have emerged otherwise. "These are all great ideas," Maya said, "but I think we should start with something that doesn't require a lot of money or complicated logistics. What if we began by just walking through the neighborhood and identifying animals that need help? We could create a map showing where strays hang out, which houses have pets that look neglected, that sort of thing." The committee members exchanged glances, recognizing the wisdom in Maya's suggestion. They agreed to meet after school to begin their neighborhood survey, armed with clipboards, cameras, and the kind of determination that could only come from young people who believed they could change the world. At exactly 3:30, Maya's phone rang with a call from Alexander Russo. She had been expecting this call all day, but hearing his voice still sent a thrill of excitement through her chest. "Maya, how was your first day as a celebrity?" Alexander asked, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "It was interesting. I'm not used to being the center of attention, but it gave me some ideas about how we could get other kids involved in helping animals." "That's exactly the kind of thinking that convinced me you were the right person for this job." "Maya, I've been busy today too. I had my lawyers draft the initial paperwork for the Maya Chen Animal Rescue Center, and I've been meeting with architects about potential locations for our facility." Maya felt a surge of excitement mixed with nervousness. The speed at which Alexander was moving made everything feel more real and more intimidating at the same time. "You've already found a location?" "Actually, I've found 3 potential locations, and I'd like you to help me choose between them. Would you and your grandmother be available to meet me this Saturday morning? We could visit all 3 sites and discuss the advantages and disadvantages of each." The invitation represented another step into a world Maya had never imagined entering, but she felt ready for the challenge. "I'd love to. Should I bring anything specific?" "Just bring your questions and your honest opinions. Maya, I want you to understand that this is your project, as much as it is mine. Every major decision will be made with your input, because you're the one who inspired this entire endeavor." After ending the call, Maya found herself staring at her phone in amazement. 24 hours ago, she had been a typical 7th grader, worrying about math homework and wondering if she'd have enough money to buy lunch. Now she was planning to spend Saturday morning grass touring potential sites for an animal rescue center that would bear her name and serve as a model for similar facilities throughout the country. The transformation felt surreal. But Maya also recognized that it was simply the logical extension of a choice she had made to act on her values rather than merely think about them. She had seen suffering and responded to it. And that response had opened doors she never knew existed. That evening, Maya and her grandmother sat at their small kitchen table, sharing dinner and discussing the day's developments. Mrs. Chen listened with the careful attention of someone who understood that major life changes required thoughtful navigation, especially when they came unexpectedly and with such potential for both positive and negative consequences. "Maya, this Mr. Russo seems to be a man of his word," Mrs. Chen observed, cutting her dumpling with precise movements that spoke to decades of practice. "But I want you to remember that business relationships, even ones that begin with genuine friendship, can become complicated as they develop." "What do you mean, Grandma?" "I mean that right now, you and Mr. Russo are united by a shared passion for helping animals. But as this project grows, you'll face decisions about money, staffing, policies, and priorities that might test that unity. You need to be prepared to stand up for your principles, even when it's difficult or uncomfortable." Maya absorbed her grandmother's wisdom, understanding that Mrs. Chen was drawing on experiences that predated Maya's birth but remained relevant to her current situation. "How do I know what my principles are?" "You've already demonstrated them, Maya. You believe that suffering deserves attention regardless of its source. You believe that individual action can create meaningful change. You believe that resources should be used to help those who cannot help themselves." Mrs. Chen paused, meeting her granddaughter's eyes across the table. "The challenge will be maintaining those beliefs when you're faced with competing pressures and limited resources." The conversation continued late into the evening, covering topics ranging from the practical aspects of running a nonprofit organization to the emotional challenges of dealing with animal suffering on a daily basis. Maya felt grateful for her grandmother's guidance, but also increasingly confident in her ability to handle whatever responsibilities lay ahead. Friday morning brought a phone call from Dr. Kim with an update on Courage's condition. The injured dog was, quote, recovering well from his surgery. His wounds were healing cleanly, and his appetite had returned with encouraging enthusiasm. More importantly, his gentle temperament and obvious intelligence made him an ideal candidate for adoption by a family with children. "Maya, I've had 3 families call about Courage since yesterday," Dr. Kim reported. "Word is spreading about his rescue, and people are specifically asking about adopting the dog that girl saved in traffic. I think you've created the most famous stray in Chicago." The news filled Maya with mixed emotions. She was thrilled that Courage would find a loving home, but also felt a pang of sadness at the thought of saying goodbye to the animal whose rescue had changed her life so dramatically. She realized that this was the first of many difficult goodbyes she would experience in her new role as a rescue advocate. "Dr. Kim, could I meet the families before you make a decision? I know it sounds silly, but I feel responsible for making sure Courage goes to the right home." "Maya, that doesn't sound silly at all. In fact, it sounds like exactly the kind of careful approach that will make you an excellent advocate for rescue animals. Why don't you come by tomorrow afternoon, after your site visits with Mr. Russo? I'll arrange for all 3 families to meet Courage, and you can help me evaluate which one would be the best fit." Saturday morning arrived with the crisp clarity of late autumn, the kind of weather that made Chicago's architecture look particularly impressive against the backdrop of a cloudless sky. Maya dressed in her best clothes, a navy blue dress that her grandmother had bought for school picture day, and waited nervously for Alexander's arrival. At exactly 9 o'clock, a sleek black sedan pulled up in front of their apartment building. Alexander stepped out, dressed casually in khakis and a sweater that probably cost more than Maya's family spent on clothing in a year, but his demeanor was relaxed and approachable. "Good morning, Maya. Mrs. Chen, it's a pleasure to finally meet you, Alexander said, extending his hand to Maya's grandmother with the kind of respectful attention that immediately won her approval. Mr. Russo, thank you for taking such an interest in my granddaughter's welfare, Mrs. Chen replied, studying his face with the careful assessment she reserved for people who might have significant influence over Maya's future. Mrs. Chen, Maya has already had a profound influence on my life, and I suspect she's going to have an even greater impact on this community. I'm honored to be part of whatever she decides to build. The first location Alexander wanted to show them was a converted warehouse in the Lincoln Park neighborhood, a spacious facility with high ceilings and large windows that would provide excellent natural light for the animals. The building had previously housed an art studio, and traces of its creative past remained in the form of colorful paint stains on the concrete floors and inspirational murals on the brick walls. This space could accommodate up to 50 animals at a time, Alexander explained as they walked through the empty rooms. The rent is reasonable, and the neighborhood has good public transportation access, which would make it easy for families to visit and for volunteers to get here. Maya walked through the space slowly, trying to imagine how it would look filled with kennels and examination rooms, adoption areas, and administrative offices. She could envision children like herself coming here for bravery, educational programs, learning about responsible pet ownership and the importance of spaying and neutering. She could picture volunteers walking dogs in the small courtyard behind a building, and families meeting their new pets in the comfortable BA adoption rooms. It's beautiful, Maya said, but it feels like it's designed more for people than for animals. I think we need something that prioritizes the animal's comfort and well-being first, and that accommodates the human needs. Alexander nodded thoughtfully, recognizing the wisdom in her observation. You're absolutely right. What would you change about this space to make it more animal-friendly? More outdoor space, for one thing. Dogs need room to run and play, not just a small courtyard. And cats need vertical space, places to climb and hide when they feel overwhelmed. This building is designed for humans who walk upright, not for animals who need different kinds of space. The second location was a former veterinary clinic in the Pilsen neighborhood, complete with existing examination rooms, surgical facilities, and boarding areas. The building was smaller than the first option, but had been specifically designed for animal care, with features like specialized ventilation systems, soundproofing between rooms, and easy-to-clean EI surfaces throughout. This feels more like what we need, Maya said as they toured the facility. The animals would be comfortable here, and we wouldn't have to spend as much money on renovations. The downside is that it's smaller, Alexander pointed out. We could probably accommodate only about 25 animals at a time, which means we'd have to turn away cases when we're at capacity. Maya considered this limitation, weighing the trade-offs between size and suitability. Maybe that's not necessarily a bad thing. If we focus on providing really excellent care for a smaller number of animals, we might be able to get them adopted faster, which would free up space for new rescues. Mrs. Chen had been quietly observing the discussions, noting the way Maya and Alexander collaborated to evaluate each option. She was impressed by the respect Alexander showed for Maya's opinions and the way he encouraged her to think through the implications of different choices. The third location was the most surprising, a sprawling property on the outskirts of the city that had previously been used as a boarding school. The main building was a beautiful stone structure with large windows and spacious rooms, surrounded by 20 acres of fenced grounds that included wooded areas, open fields, and a small pond. "This is incredible," Maya breathed as they walked through the property. The animals would have so much space to exercise and play. We could have separate areas for different types of animals, maybe even a farm sanctuary for rescued livestock. It's certainly the most ambitious option, Alexander agreed. But it would also be the most expensive to operate, and the location might make it difficult for city families to visit. Maya spent nearly an hour exploring the grounds, her imagination running wild with possibilities. She envisioned hiking trails where volunteers could walk dogs, outdoor classrooms where children could learn about wildlife conservation, and peaceful gardens where stressed animals could recover from the trauma of ASH. abandonment, or abuse. But as much as she loved the rural property, Maya found herself returning to the practical considerations that her grandmother had emphasized. The rescue center needed to serve the urban community where the greatest need existed, and that meant choosing accessibility over beauty, function over fantasy. "I think we should go with the second option," Maya announced as they gathered in the main building's entrance hall. "The former veterinary clinic. It's the right size for what we're trying to accomplish. It's already designed for animals, and it's located in a neighborhood where people really need our services." Alexander smiled, recognizing the thoughtful reasoning behind her choice. "Maya, I think you've made an excellent decision. The Pilsen location will allow us to serve the community most effectively while maintaining the high standards of care that will make this center a model for others." As they drove back toward Maya's neighborhood, Alexander outlined his timeline for getting the rescue center operational. The lease on the Pilsen building could be signed within a week, renovations would take approximately 6 weeks, and they could begin accepting animals by the end of January. "Maya, I want you to start thinking about what your role will be once we're operational," Alexander said. "Obviously, you'll need to balance your responsibilities at the center with your schoolwork, but I'd like you to be involved in every aspect of the operation." "What kinds of things would I be doing?" "Well, you could help with intake evaluations, determining which animals are ready for adoption and which ones need more time to recover. You could work with our education coordinator Tabal, develop programs for schools and community groups. You could assist with fundraising events and public relations activities. And most importantly, you could help us stay focused on our mission of providing compassionate care for animals in need." End quote. Maya felt a thrill of excitement at the prospect of being so deeply involved in the center's operations. She had never imagined having this kind of responsibility at her age, but she also felt ready for the challenge. That afternoon, Maya and Alexander visited Dr. Kim's clinic to check on Courage and meet the families interested in adopting him. The injured dog had transformed dramatically in just a few days of professional care. His coat was clean and brushed, his wounds were healing well, and his eyes sparkled with the kind of intelligence that made him irresistible to potential adopters. The 3 families who had expressed interest in Courage were as different as Maya could have imagined. The first was a young couple in their 20s, both graduate students who lived in a small apartment near the university. They were enthusiastic and well-informed about dog care, but Maya worried about whether they would have enough time for a pet given their demanding academic schedules. The second family included parents in their 40s with 2 teenage children who had been begging for a dog for years. They had a large house with a fenced yard, and extensive experience with pets, having previously owned both dogs and cats. They seemed like the obvious choice, but something about their dynamic made Maya uneasy. The third option was Mrs. Eleanor Williams, a retired teacher in her 60s, who lived alone in a modest house near Maya's neighborhood. She had recently lost her elderly dog to cancer and was looking for a companion to share her golden years. She spoke to Courage with the gentle authority of someone who understood animals intuitively, and the dog responded to her with immediate trust and affection. "Mrs. Williams, can I ask you something?" Maya said as the older woman sat on the floor of the examination room, allowing Courage to rest his head in her lap. "Of course, dear. What would you like to know? What would you do if Courage got sick again? I mean, if he needed expensive medical treatment?" Mrs. Williams considered the question seriously, recognizing its importance. "Maya, I've been saving money for years to care for my previous dog in his final illness. I believe that when you adopt a pet, you're making a commitment to provide whatever care they need for their entire life, regardless of the cost. Maya felt her heart settle into certainty. Mrs. Williams was the right choice, not because she had the most resources or the most experience, but because she understood that love meant commitment, especially when that commitment became difficult or expensive. "Dr. Kim, I think Mrs. Williams should adopt Courage," Maya announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had earned the right to make this decision. Alexander watched with admiration as Maya facilitated the adoption process, ensuring that Mrs. Williams understood Courage's medical history and follow-up care requirements. He realized that Maya possessed natural instincts for matching animals with appropriate families, skills that would serve her well in her new role as a rescue advocate. As they prepared to leave the clinic, Dr. Kim pulled Maya aside for a private conversation. Maya, I want you to know that what you did for courage was just the beginning. Over the next few months, you're going to see animals and situations that will break your heart. You're going to face cases where you can't save them, and you're going to have to make difficult decisions about euthanasia and resource allocation. Maya felt a chill of apprehension at Dr. Kim's words, but also a deepening resolve. Dr. Kim, I know this isn't going to be easy, but I also know that every animal we save makes it worthwhile. That's the right attitude, Maya. Just remember that you don't have to carry this burden alone. Mr. Russo, your grandmother, and I will all be here to support you when the work gets difficult. Sunday evening found Maya in her bedroom, working on a school presentation about community service, while simultaneously researching animal rescue techniques on her laptop. The dual focus seemed appropriate, given how thoroughly her rescue work had become integrated with her academic life. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Alexander. Maya, I wanted you to know that I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, and I realize how much I'd learned from you in just a few days. You've taught me that leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about asking the right questions and listening carefully to the responses. Maya smiled as she read his message, understanding that their partnership had evolved into something more meaningful than either of them had initially expected. She had gained access to resources and opportunities that would allow her to help animals on a scale she never could have imagined. He had rediscovered a sense of purpose that connected his business success to his deepest values. She typed her response carefully. Mr. Russo, I think we make a good team because we both believe that everyone deserves a chance to be saved, whether they're dogs or people. Thank you for giving me the chance to turn one moment of courage into something that will last. 3 weeks later, Maya stood in the main lobby of the newly renovated Maya Chen Animal Rescue Center, watching as the first group of rescued animals was brought in for evaluation and care. The space had been transformed into exactly what she had envisioned, a place where animals could recover from trauma while preparing for their new lives with loving families. Alexander joined her at the large window overlooking the main adoption area, where volunteers were already at work socializing dogs and cats who had arrived that morning from various situations of neglect and abandonment. Maya, do you remember what you told me that first day about why you stopped to help courage? Maya nodded, recalling the moment that had started everything. I said I did it because no one else would. Well, look around you. Now there are dozens of people who will. You didn't just save one dog that day, Maya. You saved the idea that individual actions matter, that ordinary people can create extraordinary change. Maya watched as a young volunteer, probably not much older than herself, gently coaxed a frightened kitten out of its carrier. The scene represented everything she hoped the rescue center would become. A place where compassion was practiced daily, where second chances were given freely, and where the community came together to care for its most vulnerable members. Mr. Russo, I have an idea for our next project. Alexander raised an eyebrow, recognizing the tone that had preceded every major breakthrough in their partnership. What kind of project? I think we should start a program that teaches kids how to recognize and report animal abuse. Not just in our neighborhood, but throughout the city. We could train high school students to be advocates in their own communities. Alexander felt the familiar thrill of inspiration that had become associated with Maya's ideas. Maya Chen, I think you're going to change the world. Maya looked out at the animals beginning their journeys toward new homes and new lives, understanding that every ending was also a beginning, every rescue was also a hope, and every moment of courage could ripple outward in ways that no one could fully predict or control. Mr. Russo, I think we already have. The Maya Chen Animal Rescue Center opened its doors to the public on a snowy January morning, with a ribbon-cutting ceremony attended by city officials, local media, and dozens of community members who had heard about the remarkable story of how one girl's compassion had grown into a movement that would serve Chicago's animals for generations to come. Maya stood beside Alexander as he handed her the ceremonial scissors, but instead of cutting the ribbon herself, she invited Mrs. Williams and Courage to join them. The former stray dog, now healthy and happy, wagged his tail enthusiastically as the crowd cheered and cameras flashed. This center exists because one person decided to act on their values instead of just thinking about them, Maya said into the microphone, her voice carrying clearly across the gathered crowd. But it will succeed because all of you have decided to act on your values too. Every volunteer hour, every donation, every adoption, every moment of kindness matters. Together, we can make sure that no animal in our community suffers alone. As the ribbon fell away and the crowd moved inside to tour the facility, Maya caught sight of her grandmother in the audience, tears of pride streaming down her weathered face. Mrs. Chen nodded approvingly, her expression conveying everything that words could never adequately express about the journey they had shared from that first moment when Maya chose courage over safety, compassion over all convenience. 6 months later, the Maya Chen Animal Rescue Center had facilitated over 300 adoptions, provided medical care for more than 500 animals, and established satellite programs in 4 other Chicago neighborhoods. Maya's youth advocacy program had trained over 50 high school students to recognize and report animal abuse, creating a network of compassionate observers throughout the city. But for Maya, the numbers were less important than the individual stories. The 3-legged cat who found a family that loved her exactly as she was, the elderly dog who spent his final months in comfort and dignity, the litter of puppies who grew up in foster care before finding permanent homes where they would be cherished for their entire lives. Each rescue represented a choice to value life over convenience, to prioritize compassion over profit, to believe that every creature deserved a chance at happiness and security. Maya had learned that courage wasn't a single moment of dramatic action, but rather a daily commitment to doing what was right even when it was difficult, expensive, or inconvenient. On the first anniversary of Courage's rescue, Maya stood once again in the intersection where her life had changed forever. The traffic flowed around her just as it had a year ago, but now she saw it differently. Each car contained a person with the potential to choose compassion over indifference. Each moment presented an opportunity to make a difference. And each decision rippled outward in ways that could transform not just individual lives, but entire communities. Alexander joined her on the sidewalk, carrying a small bouquet of flowers they planned to place at the base of the traffic light in honor of all the animals they had saved and all the ones they hoped to save in the future. Maya, do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't stopped that day? Maya considered the question, thinking about the alternate timeline where she had continued walking, where Courage had died alone in the street, where the rescue center had never been built, where hundreds of animals had never found homes. I think about it sometimes, she said, but not with regret. I think about it with gratitude that I was brave enough to make the choice that led to all of this. What do you think made you brave enough? Maya smiled, remembering her grandmother's words about courage being measured not in years, but in the quality of choices made during difficult moments. I think I was brave enough because I remembered that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you're scared and you do the right thing anyway. As they walked back toward the rescue center, Maya felt the weight of responsibility and the lightness of purpose combining in her chest like 2 melodies harmonizing into something more beautiful than either could create alone. She had learned that individual actions could indeed create waves of change, that young people could make meaningful contributions to their communities, and that sometimes the smallest acts of courage had the power to transform entire worlds. The Maya Chen Animal Rescue Center continued to thrive, serving as a model for similar facilities across the country and inspiring a new generation of young advocates who understood that compassion was not just an emotion, but a practice, not just a feeling, but a commitment to action. And in the quiet moments between rescues, when Maya would sit with a frightened animal and whisper the same words she had once whispered to Courage, she would remember that everything had started with a single choice: to care more about suffering than about safety, to value life more than convenience, and to believe that one person, no matter how young or small, could indeed make a difference that would echo through time like ripples spreading across the surface of a still pond, touching shores they would never see, but trusting that their impact would be both lasting and meaningful. The story of Maya Chen and the intersection where she stopped traffic to save an injured dog became legend in Chicago. But more importantly, It became inspiration for countless other moments of courage, large and small, that reminded people throughout the city that compassion was not just something to admire, but something to practice. Not just something to discuss, but something to live every single day.